How is religion good for you? From an atheist. If you've been watching debates between atheists and Christians, for example, you'll have noticed this shift. It used to be a debate about whether or not God exists, and we'd all watch while Christopher Hitchens just wiped the floor with people with just sheer intellectual prowess. Insert Hitch slap.
To tell a child, you go to this church, which means you'll go to heaven, but your little playmates don't go to that church, and therefore will go to hell, seems to me to be an unpleasant thing to be saying. But
yes, that is.
Maybe I'm in a minority then.
That could be an unpleasant thing, but how do you develop?
Actually, an evil thing.
Let's call it evil, Christopher.
Something that only a religious person would dream of saying.
Let's call it evil. Where does evil come from?
Religion.
Now, there aren't a lot of debates between atheists and deists, or adeists and deists, because if you just believe in a creator God who doesn't interact with humans, deism, because the way that you see the universe, you feel like it needs a creator, there's not much we can argue about there. And I'm not saying that I believe in a creator God, I'm just saying that because the origins of life are still so mysterious and the origins of the universe are mysterious, there's multiple available theories. And so there's still a God of the gap situation going on. But with theism, where not only are you claiming a creator God, but one that interacts with humanity and is good and is represented correctly by one of our religions, of our thousands and thousands of religions, we can have a debate on that. And those debates did not go very well for theists in the past 20 years. For people watching, it became clear that when someone like William Craig laid out his arguments for Christianity, and all the same arguments could be made for Islam, but he sees Islam as a false religion.
Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false preaching?
Yes, I think, yeah, certainly.
Would you name one then?
Islam.
That's quite a lot.
It became clear to those watching that we tend to argue for the religion that we are psychologically and socially benefiting from. And with every other religion, we see what they are doing as superstitious and heretical. So there was this collective realization as we began to get online and bump into one another's religions that people of other religions believe as strongly as you do. They have evidence supporting their belief system, and they see patterns that prove their beliefs in their lives. So maybe there's something else going on here because we can't all be right. So maybe we're all wrong when it comes to knowing what God is and what God is thinking at any particular moment. This happened for me in theology school. I'm in my master's program. No, I was in my doctorate program, and I'm studying all the different kinds of gods and how God changes based on what's going on in the culture at the time. And you begin to realize, oh, I think we're the ones creating God. And there's far more evidence for that. Even if you are a believer in one God, you at least have to argue that every other God, millions of gods for at least 100,000 years of worshiping various gods, was misguided. So even for the believer, there's more evidence that we create God because you at least believe that about everybody else. And universalism, or this idea that all these conceptualizations or interactions are with the same God, or they're facets of the same diamond, eventually that view falls short because there are truth claims that are mutually exclusive and they cancel out one another. So since Hitch's death, really in 2011, I'd say that there's been a big shift in these debates where now we're not talking about the question of whether or not God exists. We're talking about whether or not religion is good for people and good for society. Even the Jordan Peterson-Sam Harris debates in 2018 weren't really about the existence of God. It was really about how Jordan Peterson fears nihilism and Sam Harris fears fundamentalism. And Jordan Peterson was arguing that if we pull out this God piece, we're going to lose a lot of the structure and foundation that keeps us out of nihilism and chaos. And regardless of what you think about Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris politically, as they are both very divisive political commentators, the actual forepart of the debate, I think, was the debate of our time, which is this question of whether believing in God or having religion is good for you, or the deeper question of can we survive without shared myths when we never have before? Can secularism fill that gap? Can we detach from our history that much and truly create communities, morality, moral education, ritual, culture, the transcendent, art, contemplation? Can we do that without God? To which Jordan Peterson replies, no, secularism isn't doing that well. And Sam Harris would reply that we just need more time, just hasn't had enough time to develop. So an example of one of these debates more recently is Ben Shapiro and Alex O'Connor on whether or not religion is good for you. And Alex asks Ben, what should someone like me do who is an atheist and can't believe in God? And Ben essentially says, do your part to support religion in your area or things will get worse for society.
Suppose it's the case that I agree wholesale with your proposition that religion is good and maybe even necessary for society in some way, right? Suppose I just say that that's true. I don't believe it's true. I've tried, I'm sorry, I just don't believe it. And so, I'm now left with a choice here. I don't think it's true, but I become convinced that it's somehow useful or beneficial. What am I to do with this information?
I think that you should re-engage with your social institutions, including your church. I think that saying to people on an individual level, don't do drugs, study hard for your tests, get married before you have kids, get a job. Like it's easy to say that to people. And I think that without supporting social institutions that reinforce that nearly every day and make it part of the culture that surrounds you, it's very difficult for people to live that. And so I think that removing God as sort of the capstone of these institutions, the whole institution tends to fall apart. So on a practical level, if you get rid of God, the institution just ceases to exist, and you can yell as much as you want, but individuals are far less likely to provide the social reinforcement and social networks for support that actually create the bases of a good, fundamentally solid civilization.
So let's back this up. Why do we do religion? How is religion good for you? Is there evidence that religion is good for you? And can we get those tools without faith or without belief? Is a belief in God kind of central to getting those tools? That's the question that we're going to be dealing with today. So our best guess so far as to why religion exists at all is that religion originates from our brain's tendency to be pattern-seeking and meaning-seeking. So HADD, which is Hyperactive Agency Detection Device, is a cognitive theory that explains why our brains are so naturally superstitious. The idea is that humans evolved to be highly sensitive to detecting agency or intentional beings because it was advantageous for survival. So, for example, early humans were quick to assume that a rustling in the bushes was caused by a predator, and they were more likely to survive than those who ignored it and said it's probably nothing. So over time, this heightened sensitivity to agency became hardwired into our brains. So when humans detect agency in ambiguous situations and see patterns in nature, or they're experiencing mysterious events, they attribute these to unseen beings or forces. And this laid the cognitive groundwork for what would be eventually beliefs in spirits or gods or other supernatural entities. So early humans would have interpreted natural phenomena like thunderstorms, illness, or death as being caused by some kind of unseen agents, and this would be the basis, the foundation of how religious systems are formed. And we still do this today, even if you're not religious. I sometimes will irrationally get mad at my printer as if it's effing with me on purpose, as if it has agency, or as if it knew that I needed the printer today. And so we have this tendency to assign agency to the world around us, even when we know that that thing does not have agency.
Why did you randomly stop printing? Can't find network. No, you're in network. I have changed nothing. Doesn't feel like that to me. This is time sensitive, and I need this printed now. Your little minor inconvenience is not my problem. You literally have one job, and every time I ask you to do your one job, you cannot get it together and do the thing that you're built to do. Actually,
so one lie of atheism is that we are all born atheists. And that may be true in the sense that we usually take on the religion of our parents, but it's also not true. If you stick 100 babies on an island and allow them to grow up, it will not be an atheist society. They will create religion. So we may be born atheists, but we are born superstitious. And that actually has to be undone through education, in the same way that our brains still freak out and tell us to eat sugar when we get our first taste of sugar, because our bodies are still operating from a world where fresh fruit is only going to be this ripe right now. So eat as much as you can. And we have to educate ourselves and override that impulse with education. The same thing is happening with religion. So once we have that foundation laid in our brains, that things we don't understand or patterns that we see are due to agents like gods, we start to pack more and more into that. Like when we get smart enough to realize that we're going to die, we start imagining a different world or a way that we could still be connected to the people we lose. And that is when and that happened when we started burying people with items that have use for the living, but we start burying them with the dead. And then we start doing these communal rituals to the point that we even develop this placebo effect where we get better when we are tended to by others around us. So evolution rewarded us for this pro-social behavior, and tribes that had communal ritual, that danced together, that did psychedelics together, that tried to heal one another when sick, that prayed over one another, those societies survived, and the ones that didn't have those communal bonds died out. So over time, religion takes on more and becomes more and more of an evolutionary advantage. It takes on fears like our fear of death, fear of meaninglessness, fear that our lives don't matter. It takes on more of our desires, our desire to feel special, our desire to be seen and understood, our desire for eternal justice when things are unfair, our needs for structure and ritual and community and story and mentorship and rituals on how to process death and social rules and boundaries. So nowadays, religion is not just a belief system or not just our tendency to be superstitious. A more accurate thing to say is that religion is a vessel for all kinds of tools because it co-evolved with us. So take something like Mormonism, for example. This was the religion that I was raised in as a child. It's not just a belief in a specific kind of God. In that belief system is a vessel of everything that you need as a human. You automatically get community. If I were Mormon and I were to pack up my stuff and move anywhere in the world, there would be a Mormon ward or church on the other end that would help me unpack my stuff. There's stories about death and how death isn't the end, and traditions for how we deal with death in the family. There's music and opportunities to sing together, which is really positive for our mental state. There's rules about right and wrong and other adults to help teach you. There are rituals for children and coming of age. There's curriculum for every age group. A religion like Mormonism tells you a story, and if you accept that story, you get all of these tools. You don't have to feel that life is meaningless. You don't have to face death. You don't have to be alone. Here's a community. Here's all your best friends. Here's a wealth of inspiration from other leaders. Here's opportunities to grow and serve in the community. Here's a path for how you should live your life and how to raise children. Here's order. Here's structure. Here's a list of things to stay away from by order of God, like alcohol and, in Mormonism's case, coffee. So the religion is not just a belief, it's a vessel for all of these tools that we have developed for our subconscious fears and desires in order to be able to function. So another lie of atheism is that if people just leave religion, they'll just know how to orient themselves in the universe. They will just live their best life as if they just will stumble upon it. When really religion evolved over time to be whatever we needed it to be. And when we lose religion, we can lose tools that were in that vessel. So Dan Dennett, the philosopher, he also argues that religion began as a byproduct of human cognitive functions such as agency detection and our capacity for imagination, which helped early humans interpret their environment and predict threats. And then he actually charts this out that over time, these functions led to belief in supernatural agents, which begin to be culturally reinforced through rituals and stories and social structures. So Dan Dennett suggests that religions were more successful in promoting group cohesion and survival, and that was passed down, and that shapes the complex religious systems that we have seen today. Ultimately, he sees religion as an adaptive cultural meme that evolved with us, much like language or other social institutions. So if we create religion as the vessel for all of these other needs that we have as humans, is religion then good for us because it co-evolved with our needs? There is some evidence that supports this that I have to admit to, even as an atheist. The data is early, but some reports are showing that religious people fared better over non-religious people during COVID. Religious people tend to have larger social networks and stronger ties to their community and more social support, especially for men, which contributes to their overall well-being in their mental and physical health. Religions, compared to secularism, have more children and have communities to support those children more than secularism has been able to produce. Numerous studies have linked religious participation with better mental health. So, for example, a review published in the American Journal of Psychiatry highlighted that people involved in regular religious practices were less likely to suffer from depression and anxiety because of these coping mechanisms that religion provides, such as prayer or meditation. Similarly, another study done in 2016 showed that people who attend religious services regularly lived longer, with a 33% lower risk of dying during that study period. Religious rituals like prayer or meditation help reduce stress and anxiety. So the repetitive and structured nature of these activities help to calm our neural networks and boost emotional regulation. Religious beliefs can provide existential meaning, and that helps people deal with their fear of death and offer kind of psychological resilience during times of crisis. So studies like this, even by Pew Research Center in 2019, have shown that religious individuals are more likely to volunteer and participate in charity work. If there is a flood or something going on and you were to poll the people who are putting up sandbags, they tend to be more religious than not. So religion often promotes values like altruism and cooperation, and provides a structure where people are able to get together and be able to provide service. And there's a sense of responsibility to others and to your community, which contributes to social cohesion and even individual happiness. So these studies, along with countless others, suggest that religion, regardless of its truth claims, it's not about the truth claims, the truth claims create the religion and create the community, has tangible benefits for your mental, emotional, and social well-being. And this is why when someone says, like, I was lost and I found Jesus and my life got better, I don't have to deny that, even as an atheist. If you are in chaos, and this is why when someone says, I was lost and I found Jesus and my life got better, I don't have to deny that, even as an atheist. If you are in chaos, any system that helps you to order your life and give you some community and resources and make your life more functional is going to help you. People find Jesus, they find the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. There's even people who say, I found Jordan Peterson's 12 rules or 24 rules or however many he has by now. I don't doubt that at all. If you are in chaos and you stumble upon religion or some kind of system that has, a vessel for these tools, your quality of life can go up. We see this with this wave of celebrity rebaptisms or adult baptisms where they're just doing cocaine, throwing money at stuff, in total chaos, being miserable, and then they wander back into religion for some meaning and purpose and structure and claim that their life got better. I don't doubt that as far as their lived experience. What we should discuss, though, is it the actual belief? Is it the truth claim? Or is it the tools that come to you when you believe that truth claim? That's the question. So a more interesting question for any kind of religion is not, is this religion true? Especially for something like Mormonism. Mormonism is a young religion that had a pretty good record-keeping tradition where we can actually prove that the church's narrative is not true. The more interesting question is something like, can Mormonism or some other religion be good for you even when it's not true? That's a far more interesting question than trying to watch Mormon apologists find increasingly absurd ways to make the Book of Mormon historical when it's proven that it can't be. So I think the short answer to this is yes. Religion can be a way to improve human well-being because it has evolved to meet all of our needs, especially for men. Since the agricultural age, which is around 10,000 BC, religion has been written by men, and not just any type of man, a specific kind of man, a priest class man, which means that these are men who are being supported by their tribe for their religious labors and for their writings. And so we're seeing this play out today where women can become educated and they have some level of reproductive rights. The women are leaving the church at faster rates than men. There's this massive gap between Gen Z men in church and Gen Z women in church, for example, which is the biggest shift in my field since I started studying religion 20 years ago. When I started, it was true across the board that women were more spiritual than men and women were more religious. More women went to church, prayed, believed that God was important in their lives, read scripture, and now women are transitioning over to more pagan-based, body-oriented, intuition oriented, more feminine oriented places for spirituality. But for men in modern Western society, it may be that the only place where men can talk to other men socially outside of business and have community is in church. Women often can replace community after leaving religion, where men can often get more isolated because church is the only place that they have where it's socially acceptable for men to have feelings or cry or have relationships with other people that isn't based on business. So yes, religion can be a tool for human well-being. Even as an atheist, I have to look at the data and say there's something here, especially for the men. Now, here's the next question, which is it then the best way to get these to get these tools? What is the cost of getting these tools through religion and belief? The cost. There is always a cost when we delve into the supernatural. And maybe 1,000 years ago, that cost was one that you should pay. If you lived in a town and that town had one town church and everybody went to it for everything, for weddings and funerals and everything, to be an atheist meant that you probably paid too high of a social cost for that. But now that our truth claims are bumping into each other in the modern world, we're paying a very high cost for our competing faith stories. It was Yuval Harari recently who said that there's enough room in the Middle East for everyone to live there comfortably, to have hospitals and schools, but we can't because of our conflicting supernatural stories. So while someone may say, I'm a Mormon because it tends to be good for me in accordance with this data, there is a cost to society and to individuals for belief. Mormons, for example, very prone to conspiracy thinking, very prone to MLMs, prone to authoritarianism. They were the most supportive of Donald Trump. Not to mention the blood of gay people that they have on their hands, conversion therapy at BYU, the inherent racism of the religion, the sexual abuse that happens when they're the last group in America that has men in power able to ask women and children about whether they masturbate and how and in what way. And you get the sexism of it and women trapped in marriages because they got married at 18 and had babies right away and are totally dependent on these terrible men that the church says, don't divorce or you'll never see your family again. There's a massive cost, not just in the abuse, sexism, racism, homophobia that causes real harm in the world, but there's also a cost to society when people are so sure of the supernatural, so prone to religious thinking, so prone to conspiracies, that it even shows up in our ability to be able to govern effectively. So while it may have once been essential for you to get the tools for your life by your local religion and your tribe's religion, because that was your only option, I'd like to make an argument that it's too costly to do that today, and that there's better ways to get those tools without the abuse, the superstition, the religious violence, the fundamentalism. All of that is making it harder to make the world a better place to live in with the one life that we know we have and the one earth that we know we have. So then what do we do, especially in this diverse society? Because people always like to say here, oh, I'm doing fine without religion, or look at all the Scandinavian countries that are doing great. Scandinavian countries have a culture, and it's a small homogenous group of people with its own culture that can't be compared to larger, more diverse communities. One of the problems with Christianity is because it takes over the culture, white culture in America without Christianity, what even is that? It's been so long since white people from wherever they came from had a culture that wasn't Christianity, and so we've forgotten what that even was. So what we should be looking at is not Scandinavian countries that have a small homogenous group of people with its own culture. We should be looking at Western Europe, who I would say is not flourishing post-religion. There's concerns about what happens in that vacuum when God dies. And so what's happening is there's an increase in nationalism, there's an increase in depression and anxiety, there's an increase in fundamentalism, and there's an increase in the rise of Islam, which is one of the most dangerous forms a religion can take. And some of that is becoming so damaging to Western European society that even outright atheists like Richard Dawkins are now advocating for cultural Christianity. They're saying, hey, let's still keep Christmas. I still like these cathedrals. I still like this history. I still like the culture of it. Can we hold on to that without doing the supernatural? And it's atheists who are very much in this discussion now about, should we be cultural Christians? Because if we just take this away totally, what fills that vacuum may be worse than what Christianity was. And so my answer to this question of what do we do if religion isn't true It's harmful, but yet there's some tools here that seems to help people. What do we do? Drum roll, please. Secular spirituality. Secular spirituality essentially says, let's keep all of the good stuff that religion provides and toss out the dogma and the abuse and the supernatural truth claims. So let's go through a list of what religions do and how secular spirituality helps to separate the baby from the bathwater. So first of all, rituals. Science shows, we have a whole science of rituals. I'll do another video on it that shows that it helps us to process emotions, to mark values, to increase pleasure and decrease pain. We have science on that. Even if you know that the ritual is made up, we have science that shows that it helps us do these things. Okay, there's some science here. Let's then intentionally create rituals in your life, in your family life, that reflect your values, that aren't dependent on belief. We can just do that. Moral education. Let's get away from the God of the Old Testament, but let's use the science of happiness and Dostoevsky and moral education and human empathy and conversation to show that morality is good for us and good for others, so we can increase incentivization towards morality for ourselves and most especially for children. Community. Maybe one-stop shop community under religion isn't going to be a thing anymore. Gen Z is probably never going back to the pews. So let's reinvest that time by creating communities around us with shared values and third spaces that aren't home and school. For me, what that looked like is investing in the school culture at my kid's school, doing karate for my son so that he gets access to male mentors that are teaching him moral virtues. And for my daughter, getting involved with Girl Scouts. So we reinvested our time that we used to spend in religion to things that also gave some of that moral education, but without any Old Testament God and having to defend things like floods. Marking values. It's very good for children to gather with family for family dinner and mark values. I didn't want to do that with prayer anymore, so now my family says a quote. We hold hands and we say, Ohana means family. Family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. It's a little quote from Lilo and Stitch. It fits my family, and we don't have a picture of Jesus on my walls anymore or a picture of a temple on my walls anymore, but we made our own family rules, and I put that by the door of our entryway. Stories. I didn't want to tell my kids stories that, God got mad and so he, had to instruct the Israelites to commit a genocide. I didn't want to tell them that God created hell to populate people in and give them nightmares. So we chose new stories, new heroes, new books that we return to again and again, movies that become part of our family language. Existential fears. We need tools to face our 4 existential fears: fear of death, fear of meaninglessness, fear of isolation, and fear of freedom. But with better tools, we don't need stories about grandmas in heaven in order to cope with life. We can actually live with eyes wide open to our own mortality and the fact that the universe may not care about us, and build lives that can meet those harsh truths. So there's so many benefits to actually having better tools than the drug we collectively take at church about this imagined future life. There's science of awe and transcendence, and that these states of consciousness that we can access when you're in an old cathedral or when you are just looking out at a starry sky, that help you to be less neurotic. You feel connected, you feel awe, you feel the magic of what it is to be alive. And we can access these states without having to play the game of what is God doing and what is God thinking today. We have this history of wisdom tools, parables from Jesus and Buddhism and Hindu texts and Taoism. And a lot of this wisdom that we have in the world today has been housed by religion. So rather than throwing it all away, this is one thing that I hate that atheists do, where they just say, just throw it all away. No, let's not do that. There's some wisdom there. Let's keep the best bits. And this is what Thomas Jefferson did with the Thomas Jefferson Bible that he made oaths under. He cut out all the supernatural and all the abuse and all the genocide, and he left in the good stuff, some inspiring stuff from Sermon on the Mount. And then he made oaths on that bit of the Bible. So much of what religion does is give us tools for managing anxiety. You can always believe that God has a plan, everything's going to be okay. We know that prayer, for example, can soothe anxiety when people are feeling like they don't want, that they're feeling feelings that they don't want to feel, or even if they're feeling cognitive dissonance. When I'm arguing with someone, they'll just stop because they don't like the feelings that I'm bringing up, and so they'll just say, I'll pray for you. And what that essentially does is the prayer is not doing anything for me. It's just this little ritual that they do to process an emotion that they don't want to be having. Or this phenomenon where women will leave organized religion, they'll leave Christianity, for example, but without fully deconstructing, you'll just find a new superstitious tool for managing anxiety, like predicting the future for astrology through astrology, or doing pendulum swinging. If you go on TikTok, there'll be millions of people watching this pendulum swinger for answers like, should I break up with my boyfriend, that you used to do in prayer, and you're essentially taking the same behavior for what we do in religion and transferring it to some new age manifestation mumbo jumbo. So instead of doing that, we have to develop better tools for anxiety and emotional regulation without having to play games about, is this God's voice in my head, or is this Satan? What is Mercury up to today so I can plan my day? We have better tools now. One of my favorites is therapist Tiffany Rowe. She has these cards, I should have brought them in from the house, of top ways to emotionally regulate ourselves just through science. And she even has her son, this child, who has a little box of options for emotional regulation and how to manage his own emotions and anxiety without God, without religion. He just has this like emotional support box where he can choose what activity he wants to do when he's feeling overwhelmed with emotion. That's amazing that we can do that now. That's fantastic. Contemplation and connection, it is incredibly good for us to be connected to our deepest selves and also outside of ourselves. Religion has been a conduit to that, but when we broaden our perspective, we see that there's many ways that humans can feel this. This is the contemplation tree that shows ways that humans can feel connection, and you can build that into your life without having a religion tell you that this is the only way to do it. This is the only approved path by God. So my real point here, if you've stayed with me this long, is yes, there is some evidence that religion is good for you. But it's not the belief. It's not the religion itself. It's not because that's the correct God. It's that religion is the vessel, the story that contains all the other things that we need because it co-evolved with us to fit our needs. So how we get the best of both worlds is secular spirituality. You get all the benefits of ritual, structure, contemplation, awe, community, good environment for children, story, tools for existential fears, emotional regulation tools, science of happiness, wisdom from wisdom traditions and mystics, contemplation, meaning, purpose, all without having to believe the unbelievable, all without supporting fundamentalism by supporting religion. I took myself and my children out of religion, and I don't regret that choice, but I will say that if we don't replace it with something better for ourselves and for our families and communities, something even more sinister is going to grow in that vacuum. Nietzsche predicted that with the death of God, there would be a rise in nihilism and there would be a rise in political religions. And we see that with this rise in depression. I get nihilistic clients that are 16 years old who are talking about there's no meaning in life. We have an increase in numbing behaviors. We have an increase in anxiety. We have meaninglessness. If you read in America, the journals of school shooters, for example, there's this deep nihilistic hatred for being itself. And you also get this rise in fundamentalism because people need tools and feel lost and are scared of the chaos, and that makes them prey to cults. And there's a rise in political religions and political leaders and their promises of utopia, which we've seen in the 20th century in Europe. Now we're seeing with the rise of Christian nationalism in America. And we're seeing people, yes, they leave religion, but they just jump into the next cult. So if we don't replace religion with something better, we may end up being worse off. But due to our ability now, we do have an ability to separate the baby from the bathwater. We don't have to make that choice. We can say, yeah, I'm going to take all the tools and all the positive things, and I'm going to leave all the BS. That doesn't mean that we know what's going on with ultimate reality. If you follow my channel, you'll know that I don't make claims on what ultimate reality is. I really embrace, I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to know, but we can say that even though I don't know how many blades of grass there are on the earth, I can kind of know that it's not two. So we can leave things that we know are BS and be open to things that we don't know and still build lives with positive tools that help us to enjoy life at the level of experience. So for more on what that looks like in your own life, with your beliefs, with your family, with your unique situation, with your core values, I recommend my course on secular spirituality and my book, No Nonsense Spirituality, where I talk about all the tools that do tend towards human well-being and used to be kind of in a monopoly under religion, and how you can access these tools authentically in a way that fits you and fits your values and fits your life. And as always, no nonsense required.